I vehemently believe in due process and the virtues of it as much as I believe in free speech. And I don't just believe in it in terms of a legal doctrine, something that people are entitled to before the state can punish them. There's a reason that things like trials and evidentiary hearings have developed the way they've developed over the course of many centuries. It's a critical truth-finding tool to have an adversarial procedure where someone makes a certain claim or testifies to a certain version of events, and then they're subject to adversarial scrutiny. They're questioned by the person they're accusing. They have evidence presented that negates or calls into question the claims that they're making. Those processes are vital to understanding whether or not accusations are true or not. And what we've been doing over the past several decades, and particularly since the emergence of the Me Too movement in the context of sexual assault, is abandoning that as a value. Obviously, the phrase "believe women" was designed to say we don't actually need that process any longer. Maybe we need it to put people in prison, but not to assume that the accused are guilty. And obviously, reputational destruction is not as grave as sticking somebody in a cage, but it's not trivial either. It's something that deserves to be taken seriously on both ends. The accusations deserve to be taken seriously, but the possibility that they are the byproduct of malicious intent or poor memory or misinterpretation or outside influences or any other kinds of distortion also deserves to be taken seriously. And I realize that if you stand up in the middle of a case like this and say that, and I'm actually relieved that in this case, a lot more people seem willing to be saying it than in other cases, you not only will be accused of making apologies for a sexual offender, but then questions get raised about why you're really doing it. You must yourself have those kinds of secrets. I remember very well when I defended Alex Morse, was one of the very few people who did. All of these cowardly left-wing groups who had endorsed him immediately withdrew their endorsement or suspended it based solely on these accusations. It turned out those accusations against Alex Morse came from these Democratic Party operatives who were hoping to curry favor with Richie Neal, this very powerful Democratic congressman. The whole thing was a setup and a scam. And a lot of people will now claim that they were skeptical from the beginning, but I can assure you they were not. Because what was done in the case of me when I defended Alex Morse or Matt Gaetz, and I was not the only person, I don't mean at all to suggest that I was, I'm just recounting my own personal experience, is you immediately get accused of defending or siding with the sexual offender because you yourself are also one. That's the tactic, to try and intimidate people into raising these questions and insisting on evidence and denouncing the idea that people ought to be assumed guilty of some of the most horrific crimes based on the untested say-so of anonymous people, especially when the person being accused is a politically polarizing person. I don't care what the consequences are. I just refuse to go along with that kind of mob justice. I think mob justice is terrifying and something that we always want to avoid. I think trial by media, or worse, trial by social media, is an incredibly destructive way of trying to understand truth. And there is nothing to the Russell Brand accusations other than, at least so far, trial by media and trial by social media. I want to emphasize, I'm not here to say that I disbelieve the accusations. I'm just not going to believe them until it's subject to some kind of a fair process. And so far, that's been the opposite of what's happened. Now, I'm going to show you a part of the mini documentary that aired on Channel 4, which is a fairly centrist, trustworthy news outlet in the UK. But before I do, let me just make clear what these accusations are. There are 4 women. All of them acknowledge that they had consensual sex with Russell Brand. There's no allegation that he just, out of nowhere, without knowing who they were, attacked them one night or abducted them or jumped them in an alley. Those are not the nature of the allegations. All 4 of these women consensually dated Russell Brand, but allege that at some point in the course of that consensual relationship, he engaged in behavior that they had indicated they didn't want him to engage in. One of the cases involves classic rape allegations where one of the women claims that she had had sex with him consensually several times. One night she said, I don't want to do this, I don't want you to do this, and he did it anyway. There's another woman who says she was 16 at the time that she dated Russell Brand for 3 months. It was in the UK where the age of consent is 16, so there's no suggestion that an adult male having sex with a 16-year-old girl is illegal under British law. But she now says she retrospectively realizes that this was a form of grooming. She didn't realize it at the time. She says, though, he was emotionally manipulative. And then the other 2 cases are essentially ones of just being controlling, being emotionally and sexually aggressive. But the one case of rape in the sense that the woman said, I don't want to do this after having consensually had sex with him, is where this rape is coming from. And as usual, what ends up happening is these things end up getting conflated on purpose. Remember, the rape charges against Julian Assange were actually brought by 2 women who he was dating simultaneously, unbeknownst to the other. He was dating each. And they were engaged in a consensual sexual relationship with him. And their allegation, which emerged after the 2010 publication of the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, was that they had requested that Julian Assange always use a condom when having sex with them, but that on at least a couple of occasions, he had sex with them without using a condom, something they realized afterwards. And once they ended up speaking to one another and realized that he was cheating on each of them with the other, they both went to the police department to file a complaint. And under Swedish law, it is considered rape to have sex with somebody and not use a condom. And that's where this idea that Julian Assange is a rapist came from. So that's the basic breakdown. Here's the sort of thing that Channel 4 did. They actually, at least in one of the cases, had an actor portraying the victim in order to protect her identity.
I phoned and somebody asked what it was regarding, and I said, that's regarding Russell Brand being a sex offender.
Let me just stop that right there. Look at what's on that screen here. The allegations include rape, sexual assault, and controlling and emotionally abusive behavior. If the allegation is that Russell Brand raped a woman and sexually assaulted a woman, why add on to that this much more ambiguous phrase, emotionally controlling behavior? That's the kind of accusation that ended up at the immediate height of Me Too, destroying a lot of people's reputations and careers. It was always very vague. It didn't really involve allegations beyond things like the person was possessive or manipulative, something that happens in many relationships. It just seems very odd to have these incredibly grave crimes like rape and then just tacked onto that the category of controlling and emotionally abusive behavior. And I think one of the reasons for that is because the idea of how this got conflated is by saying, oh, we have 4 women who are accusers, make it seem like all 4 of them accused him of rape, when that's not the case. I believe 2 of them in particular, their allegations are that he was controlling and engaged in emotionally abusive behavior, which is universes away from rape. And yet you want to kind of call this reckless, this sort of conflation, but I think it's quite deliberate.
He's grabbing at my underwear, pulling it to the side. I'm telling him to get off me, and he won't get off. Like holding me up against the wall, pushing himself in me.
He grabbed me and got me on the bed. I was fully clothed and he was naked at this point, and he held me down and he was just aggressively trying to, me.
I was like, oh my God, he raped me.
I have to say, I find this use of theatrical devices, like the camera angles and the sinister music, to be deeply inappropriate if you're trying to actually present a news story that's trying to be fair about whether these accusations are true. This is cinematic manipulation. We all know it. If you go to a horror movie, the music is crucial to raising your level of suspense and fear. This is supposed to be a news story with incredibly serious consequences for a lot of different people, the accusers, the accused. Why use these kinds of techniques to manipulate the emotional reaction of the audience if the substance of the news story is as credible and substantive as they're trying to present it to be?
Forced his penis down my throat, and I couldn't breathe. It was just choking me. I was crying. And he said, oh, I only want to see your mascara run anyway.
Them blowjobs where mascara runs a little bit. Good.
I've never, ever spoken publicly about this before. Russell seems untouchable.
Let me ask about that as well. So, again, we're talking here about alleged events that took place from 2006 to 2013. The most recent one of which then was a decade ago. And we've all been through the Me Too movement, where people far more powerful than Russell Brand were taken down. Harvey Weinstein was probably the most powerful figure in Hollywood, wanted to say like the top 10 most powerful people in Hollywood. And incredibly famous and popular comedians like Louis C.K. had their careers, I'm not going to say destroyed, but harmed significantly as a result of accusations far less serious than this. So the whole point of the Me Too movement was to create a network, which it did, to enable women to come forward with a support network to be able to accuse powerful, famous, and influential men of engaging in sexual misconduct. The idea that Russell Brand, who is a famous and popular comedian, but he's not anywhere near the level of fame and power that a lot of the people have been taken down over the last 5 and 6 years. I mean, taken down like as in go to prison, fired, completely rendered off limits. And so the idea that I do understand that if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of power, it is and can be intimidating to bring accusations of this kind against somebody who has a very popular following. But the idea that, we're back in 1987 where this sort of thing is impossible to do, where Russell Brand is some kind of immense giant. I think that the fact that there was a 10 to 15 year wait between the alleged incidents and the time that people came forward, even assuming the best of motives, that's why there's statute of limitations on crimes. The main reason is because people's memories fade over time. They become unreliable with each passing year. And so I absolutely think it's a legitimate question to ask, even though there are valid answers, why it is that if these things all took place in the way that it's being portrayed, why it is that it took so long for these accusations to emerge. And you see here these media outlets doing anything but trying to create a fair picture of this story. They are obviously acting in a prosecutorial way. with the music and the camera angles and everything designed to have this be something that is not a serious bit of news reporting at all, but is a theatrical production to convict somebody in the media who they dislike ideologically. All right, they do include Russell Brand's denial. He denies it very vehemently. Instead of reading his denial, let's listen to what Russell Brand said. He knew the story was coming the day before it came. He may have known before that. Obviously, if I heard these things, of course he has as well. And here's what he said the night before the story was published.
Hello there, you Awakening Wonders. Now, this isn't the usual type of video we make on this channel where we critique, attack and undermine the news in all its corruption, because in this story, I am the news. I've received two extremely disturbing letters, or a letter and an email, one from a mainstream media TV company, one from a newspaper, listing a litany of extremely egregious and aggressive attacks, as well as some pretty stupid stuff like my community festival should be stopped, that I shouldn't be able to attack mainstream media narratives on this channel. But amidst this litany of astonishing, rather baroque attacks are some very serious allegations that I absolutely refuse. Hello there, you into the time when I was working in the mainstream, when I was in the newspapers all the time, when I was in the movies, and as I've written about extensively in my books, I was very, very promiscuous. Now, during that time of promiscuity, the relationships I had were absolutely always consensual. I was always transparent about that then, almost too transparent. And I'm being transparent about it now as well. And to see that transparency metastasized into something criminal that I absolutely deny makes me question, is there another agenda at play? Particularly when we've seen coordinated media attacks before, like with Joe Rogan when he dared to take a medicine that the mainstream media didn't approve of. And we saw a spate of headlines from media outlets across the world using the same language. I'm aware that you guys have been saying in the comments for a while, watch out, Russell, they're coming for you, you're getting too close to the truth. Russell Brand did not kill himself. I know that a year ago there was a spate of articles, Russell Brand's a conspiracy theorist, Russell Brand's right wing. I'm aware of news media making phone calls, sending letters to people I know for ages and ages. It's been clear to me, or at least it feels to me, like there's a serious and concerted agenda to control these kind of spaces and these kind of voices. And I mean my voice along with your voice. I don't mind them using my books and my stand-up to talk about my promiscuous consensual conduct in the past. What I seriously refute are these very, very serious criminal allegations. Also, it's worth mentioning that there are witnesses whose evidence directly contradicts the narratives that these two mainstream media outlets are trying to construct, apparently in what seems to me.
All right, so I think it's an important last point there, which is he is claiming, and I completely understand why he's reluctant to talk too specifically in the media or publicly without lawyers present about the specific points he's making, because you're talking here about allegations of criminality that could ultimately result in a criminal investigation, potentially criminal charges. I doubt that that will happen given the age of these allegations, but that's easy for me to say. If you're Russell Brand, you're obviously going to be concerned about that. But nonetheless, what he references there, the availability of witnesses who directly negate at least some of these allegations. And this is what I'm talking about. In a process designed to test accusations, these are all the sorts of things we see. We have the witnesses who come forward with their version of events. They produce whatever corroborating evidence they may have. And then you have the accused and the ability of their lawyers to summon people, to obtain evidence, to present all sorts of testimony that calls into question the veracity of the accusations. We haven't seen any of that. None of it. None of it. And so for anyone who's going around either explicitly stating or strongly implying that Russell Brand is guilty of these crimes without having even spent a few days pondering or thinking about the evidence presented, I really question the ethics of people who are willing to do that. Now, I will say there is this kind of counter narrative that I'm also reluctant to jump on board with, which is the idea that because of Russell Brand's political perspective and his strong critiques of establishment centers of power and their orthodoxies, that this is nothing more than a kind of plot on the part of powerful people to take down a influential critic. And I'm unwilling to jump on that bandwagon for the same reason I'm unwilling to assume the evidence or the accusations here true, which is there's not yet evidence for that. Maybe there will be. But what I will say is this is the sort of thing that is done to people who become influential establishment critics. I'll tell you a story that really stuck with me. When I was a child, one of my childhood heroes was Dan Ellsberg. I've talked about this before. I wrote an article in Rolling Stone when Dan Ellsberg passed away 2 or 3 months ago. And I was always obsessed with the Pentagon Papers in my childhood. I read everything I could and got my hands on it. I thought it was this incredibly fascinating story that this person very high up inside the US government who had been trained for all sorts of security clearances to be one of the most influential and powerful people in Cold War US security state policymaking, turned on the very establishment that had given him all of his credentials and power because he realized the government was systematically lying to the country about the Vietnam War, conscripting Americans to go fight and die in the jungles of Vietnam in a war that the United States that American elites who are making these decisions knew they couldn't win. And as a result, he risked his liberty to take these documents that were top secret, that proved the government was lying, and give them to the media, much like Edward Snowden did 30 or 40 years later, which is why Ellsberg said he considers Snowden a hero. But one of the things that I could never understand, I don't just mean childhood, but even into my adulthood, was the response of the Nixon administration when Ellsberg leaked these documents was to break into the office of Danny Ellsberg's psychoanalyst in order to discover his psychosexual secrets so that they could leak them to the media and discredit Ellsberg. And the reason I didn't understand that in my naivete was it was a gigantic non sequitur. Here's evidence proving the US government systematically lied to the American people about the Vietnam War. Oh, well, here's evidence showing that Dan Ellsberg has bizarre fetishes and sexual fantasies and a wild sexual life. Why would one have anything to do with the other? I wondered in my naivete. And then as I began understanding better how these events work, I came to realize that this is often a tactic to discredit people that you want to discredit. Sexual scandals are the thing that people love to wallow in. They pay attention to them. They make somebody radioactive. It's the same that was done with Julian Assange. I'm not suggesting again that these cases are identical. I'm simply saying that it is not some bizarre conspiracy theory that when you want to go and discredit somebody because they have a politically influential platform spreading an ideology you find menacing, one of the favorite ways to do that is to dig into somebody's sexual past and reveal things about what they did in their private life. It's one of the most effective ways. People love sex scandals. They're easy to understand. And eventually they make people just want to turn away from the person that they've linked them to. And again, there are cases where this was done and it turned out to be evidence-free. Matt Gaetz is one of them. And there are a lot of other ones as well. So it's easy to mock, oh, Russell Brand got too close to the truth and the establishment decided they were going to concoct or fabricate accusations against him. It doesn't have to be that primitive. Again, this was a concerted effort on the part of media outlets to go searching for these kinds of allegations. And they found 1 or 2 women willing to make rape allegations from many years before conflated them with 2 or 3 other women to make it seem like he has been accused of serial rape. And again, this is something that he vehemently denies, and anybody who purports to know the truth other than Russell Brand and these women are either extremely ignorant or extremely dishonest, because there is no way to purport to know the truth about what happened here. And there won't be until there is a kind of process that enables that to take place. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.